All right. Figured before I mute, probably should have cleared that out, but hey, whatever. All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, grab our books, and get ready to jump back in where we left off. Welcome back. This is our fourth and final night of reading from P.J. Wodehouse's Right-Ho, Jeeves. It's been continuing. It has continued to be a roller coaster of emotion with this one. Birdie is seemingly about cracked the code of how to solve people's problems. And then he causes more. And then things seem to almost be falling into place. And then they fall to pieces. We saw Gussie's spectacular implosion as he decided that it was a wonderful time to take up drinking, which seemed to be, actually, not the worst of ideas. But no one taught the man portion control. It's kind of an important lesson. And then, on top of that, despite their best efforts to hide their own intended doping of Gussie, it just backfired spectacularly. And so, the prize giving was a beautiful disaster. And somehow, through all of it, Gussie had gone from engaged to his sweetheart, that he was too afraid of before the prize giving, to having broken up with them as a result of the prize giving, and then somehow proposing to Angela, who has recently broken up with Tuppy, who is now out for blood. The twists just keep on coming. The lefts, the rights, you never know. So, at this point, Birdie is about checked out. He's flush out of ideas. We don't even know how things are going with Uncle Tom and Birdie's aunt. Because, as you may recall, she lost quite a bit of money, about £5,000, gambling. That was intended to be a donation for her magazine. And the magazine is threatening to go under. And there's no more money to be pulled there because Uncle Tom is being audited and owes quite a bit of tax money. So, that's just one more bit of fuel for the fire. Let's see whether Jeeves can magically pull things together and whip things into a sensible solution. Or whether or not Birdie and really all of these other fantastically broken people are going to continue to be fantastically broken. It could go either way. I've got even odds at this point. While Jeeves is straight up magical, there's only so much you can do when, on both sides, they're trying to tear things down. We'll see. Alright, so, we've got about 5 chapters to get through tonight, and that's about on pace. So, let's dive in and see how things will shape up. We'll be continuing now from chapter 19 of Right-Ho, Jeeves. Most chaps in my position, I imagine, would have pondered all the rest of the evening without getting a bite. But we Woosters have an uncanny knack of going straight to the heart of things, and I don't suppose it was much more than 10 minutes after I had started pondering before I saw what had to be done. What was needed to straighten matters out, I perceived, was a heart-to-heart talk with Angela. She had caused all the trouble by her mutton-headed behaviour in saying yes instead of no when Gussie, in the grip of mixed drinks and cerebral excitement, had suggested teaming up. She must obviously be properly ticked off and made to return him to store. A quarter of an hour later, I had tracked her down to the summer house in which she was taking a cooler, and was seating myself by her side. "Angela," I said, and if my voice was stern, well, though whose wouldn't have been? "This is all perfect drivel." She seemed to come out of a reverie. She looked at me inquiringly. "I'm sorry, Bertie, I didn't hear. What were you talking drivel about?" "I was not talking drivel. Oh, Sorry, I thought you said you were. It is likely that I would come out here. Is it likely that I would come out here in order to talk drivel? Very likely. I thought it would be best to haul off and approach the matter from another angle. I've just been seeing Tuppy. Oh? And Gussie Fink-Nortle. Oh, yes? It appears that you have gone and got engaged to the latter. Quite right. Well, that's what I meant when I said it was all perfect drivel. You can't possibly love a chap like Gussie. Why not? You simply can't. Well, I mean to say, of course she couldn't. Nobody could love a freak like Gussie except a similar freak like the Basset. The shot wasn't on the board. A splendid chap, of course, in many ways, courteous, amiable, and just the fellow to tell you what to do till the doctor came. If you had a sick newt on your hands. But quite obviously, not of Mendelssohn's March Timber, I have no doubt that you could have flung bricks by the hour in England's most densely populated districts without endangering the safety of a single girl capable of becoming Mrs. Augustus Fink-Nortle without an anaesthetic. I put this to her, and she was forced to admit the justice of it. All right, then. Perhaps I don't. Then what, I said keenly, did you want to go and get engaged to him for? You unreasonable young fathead. I thought it would be fun. Fun! And so it has been. I've had a lot of fun out of it. You should have seen Tuppy's face when I told him. A sudden bright light shone upon me. Ah, a gesture! What? You got engaged to Gussie just to score off Tuppy? I did. Well then, that's what I was saying. It was a gesture. Yes, I suppose you could call it that. And I'll tell you something else. I'll call it V's dashed low trick. I'm surprised at you, young Angela. I don't see why. I curled the lip about half an inch. Being a female, you wouldn't. Oh, Bertie. You gentler sexes are like that. You pull off the rawest stuff without a pang. You pride yourselves on it. Look at Jael, the wife of Heber. Where did you ever hear of Jael, the wife of Heber? Possibly you are not aware that I once won a scripture knowledge prize at school. Oh yes, I remember Augustus mentioning it in his speech. Quite, I said. A little hurriedly. I had no wish to be reminded of Augustus's speech. Well, as I say, look at Jael, the wife of Heber, dug spikes into the guest coconut while he was asleep, and then went swanking about the place like a girl guide. No wonder they say, oh, woman, woman. Who? The chaps who do. Coo, what a sex! But you aren't proposing to keep this up, of course. Keep what up? This rot of being engaged to Gussie. I certainly am. Just to make Tuppy look silly? Do you think he looks silly? I do. So he ought to. I began to get the idea that I wasn't making any real headway. I remember when I won that scripture knowledge prize, having to go into the facts about Balaam's ass. I can't quite recall what they were, but I still retain a sort of general impression of something digging its feet in and putting its ears back and refusing to cooperate. And it seemed to me that this was what Angela was doing now. She and Balaam's ass were, so to speak, sisters under the skin. There's a word beginning with R. Something. Recal. Something. No, it's gone. But what am I driving at is that it was this Angela was showing herself. Silly young geezer, I said. She pinkened. I'm not a silly young geezer. You are a silly young geezer, and what's more, you know it. You don't know anything of the kind. Here you are, wrecking Tuppy's life, wrecking Gussie's life, all for the sake of a cheap score. Well, it's no business of yours. I sat on this promptly. No business of mine when I see two lives I used to go to school with wrecked. Ha! Besides, you know you're potty about Tuppy. I am not. Is that so? If I had a quid for every time I've seen you gaze at him with lovelight in your eyes... She gazed at me, but without the lovelight. Oh, for goodness sake, go away and boil your head, Bertie. I drew myself up. That, I replied with dignity, is just what I am going to do. Go away and boil. At least, I shall now leave you. I have said my say. Good, but permit me to add... I won't. Very good, I said coldly. In that case, tink-a-tonk. And I meant it to sting. Moody and discouraged were about the two adjectives you would have selected to describe me as I left the summer house. It would be idle to deny that I had expected better results from this little chat. I was surprised at Angela. Odd how you never realize that every girl is at heart a vicious specimen until something goes wrong with her love affair. This cousin and I had been meeting freely since the days when I wore sailor suits and she hadn't had any front teeth, yet only now was I beginning to get on to her hidden depths. A simple, jolly, kindly young pimple she had always struck me as. The sort you could more or less rely on not to hurt a fly. But here she was now laughing heartlessly. At least, I seem to remember hearing her laugh heartlessly, like something cold and callous out of a sophisticated talkie, and fairly spitting on her hands in her determination to bring Tuppy's grey hairs in sorrow to the grave. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Girls are rummy. Old Pop Kipling never said a truer word when he made that crack about the F of the S being more D than the M. I have no idea what those abbreviations are supposed to be. It seemed to me in the circumstances that there was but one thing to do. That is, head for the dining room and take a slash at the cold collation of which Jeeves had spoken. I felt in urgent need of sustenance, for the recent interview had pulled me down a bit. There is no gainsaying the fact that this naked emotion stuff reduces a chap's vitality and puts him in the vein for a good whack at the beef and ham. To the dining room, accordingly, I repaired, and had barely crossed the threshold when I perceived Aunt Dahlia at the sideboard, tucking into salmon mayonnaise. Tucking into what? The English. The spectacle drew from me a quick "oh, ah," for I was somewhat embarrassed. The last time this relative and I had enjoyed a tete-a-tete, it will be remembered, she had sketched out plans for drowning me in the kitchen garden pond, and I was not quite sure what my present standing with her was. I was relieved to find her in a genial mood. Nothing could have exceeded the cordiality with which she waved her fork. "Hello, Bertie, you old ass," was her very matey greeting. "I thought I shouldn't find you very far away from the food. Try some of this salmon. Excellent." "Anatole's?" I queried. "No, he's still in bed. But the kitchen maid has struck an inspired streak. It suddenly seems to have come home to her that she isn't catering for a covey of buzzards in the Sahara Desert, and she has put out something quite fit for human consumption. There is good in the girl, after all, and I hope she enjoys herself at the dance." I ladled out a portion of salmon, and we fell into pleasant conversation, chatting of this servant's ball at the Stretch the Buds, and speculating idly, I recall, as to what Seppings, the butler, would look like, doing the Roomba. It was not till I had cleaned up the first platter and was embarking on a second, when the subject of Gussie came up. Considering what had passed at Market Stansbury that afternoon, it was one which I had been expecting her to touch on earlier. When she did touch on it, I could see that she had not yet been informed of Angela's engagement. "I say, Bertie," she said, meditatively chewing fruit salad, "this spink bottle. Nottle." Okay, that's not the worst thing in the world then. Like a tuna salad sandwich would be a lot like salmon mayo. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. It just took me for a bit of a loop. "Bottle," insisted the aunt firmly. "After that exhibition of his this afternoon, Bottle, and nothing but Bottle, is how I shall always think of him. However, what I was going to say was that, if you see him, I wish you would tell him that he has made an old woman very, very happy. Except for the time when the curate tripped over a loose shoelace and fell down the pulpit steps, I don't think I have ever had a more wonderful moment than when good old Bottle suddenly started ticking Tom off from the platform. In fact, I thought his whole performance in the most perfect taste." I could not but demur. Those references to myself, those were what I liked next best. I thought they were fine. "Is it true that you cheated when you won that Scripture Knowledge Prize?" "Certainly not. My victory was the outcome of the most strenuous and unremitting efforts." "And how about the pessimism we hear of? Are you a pessimist, Bertie?" I could have told her that what was occurring in this house was rapidly making me one, but I said no, I wasn't. "That's right. Never a pessimist. Everything is for the best in this best of all possible worlds. It's a long time since that has no turning. It's always darkest before the dawn. Have patience, and all will come right. The sun will shine, although today's a grey one. Try some of this salad." Oh, that was her. I followed her advice, but even as I plied the spoon, my thoughts were elsewhere. I was perplexed. It may have been the fact that I had recently been hobnobbing with so many bowed down hearts that made this cheeriness of hers seem so bizarre. But bizarre was certainly what I found it. "I thought you might have been a trifle peeved," I said. "Peeved?" "By Gussie's manoeuvres on the platform this afternoon. I confess that I had rather expected the tapping foot and the drawn brow." Nonsense! What was there to be peeved about? I took the whole thing as a great compliment, proud to feel that any drink from my cellars could have produced such a majestic jag. It restores one's faith in post-war whiskey. Besides, I couldn't be peeved at anything tonight. I am like a little child, clapping its hands and dancing in the sunshine. Although it has been some time getting a move on, Bertie, the sun has at last broken through the clouds. Ring out those joy bells. Anatole has withdrawn his notice. What? Oh, very hearty congratulations. Thanks, yes. I worked on him like a beaver after I got back this afternoon, and finally, vowing that he would ne'er consent, he consented. He stays on. Praises be, and the way I look at it now is that God's in his heaven, and all's right with... She broke off. The door had opened. And we were plus a butler. Hello, Seppings, said Aunt Dahlia. I thought you had gone. Not yet, madame. Well, I hope you will all have a good time. Thank you, madame. Was there something you wanted to see me about? Yes, madame. It is with reference to Monsieur Anatole. It is by your wish, madame, that Mr. Finknortle is making faces at Monsieur Anatole through the skylight of his bedroom. Or is it by? Okay, so as soon as Anatole is found to not be retiring, well, Gussie is up to some antics. And that is the end of chapter 19. So, as always with this, ever and always, as soon as there's a spot of brightness, something almost going right, almost immediately the shoe drops. We're getting toward the end of the book, and things are still looking rather grim. So, let's see how long this can go, and how condensed the resolution can be, because we're, as I said, we're getting very near to the end. Chapter 20. There was one of those long silences. Pregnant, I believe, is what they're generally called. Aunt looked at Butler. Butler looked at Aunt. I looked at both of them. An eerie stillness seemed to envelop the room like a linseed poultice. I happened to be biting on a slice of apple in my fruit salad at the moment, and it sounded as if Carnera had jumped off the top of the Eiffel Tower on a cucumber frame. Aunt Dahlia steadied herself against the sideboard and spoke in a low, husky voice. Faces? Yes, madame. Through the skylight? Yes, madame. You mean he's sitting on the roof? Yes, madame. It has upset Monsieur Anatole very much. I suppose it was the word upset that touched Aunt Dahlia off. Experience had taught her what happened when Anatole got upset. I had always known her as a woman who was quite active on her pins, but I had never suspected her of being capable of the magnificent burst of speed which she now showed. Pausing merely to get a rich hunting field expletive off her chest, she was out of the room and making for the stairs before I could swallow a sliver of, I think, banana. And feeling, as I had felt when I got that telegram of hers about Angela and Tuppy, that my place was by her side, I put down my plate and hastened after her, Seppings following at a loping gallop. I say that my place was by her side, but it was not so dashed easy to get there, for she was setting a cracking pace. At the top of the first flight she must have led by a matter of half a dozen lengths, and was still shaking off my challenge when she rounded into the second. At the next landing, however, the grueling going appeared to tell on her, for she slackened off a trifle, and showed symptoms of roaring, and by the time we were in the straight, we were running practically neck and neck. Our entry into Anatole's room was as close a finish as you could have wished to see. Result: first place, Aunt Dahlia. Second place, Bertram. Third place, Seppings. Won by a short head, half a staircase separated by second and third. The first thing that met the eye on entering was Anatole. This wizard of the cooking stove is a tubby little man with a moustache of the outsize or soup strainer type, and you can generally take a line through it as to the state of his emotions. When all is well, it turns up at the end like a sergeant major's. When the soul is bruised, it droops. It was drooping now, striking a sinister note. And if any shadow of doubt had remained as to how he was feeling, the way he was carrying on would have dispelled it. He was standing by the bed in pink pajamas, waving his fist at the skylight. Through the glass, Gussie was staring down. His eyes were bulging and his mouth was open, giving him so striking a resemblance to some rare fish in an aquarium that one's primary impulse was to offer him an ant's egg. Watching this fist-waving cook and this gobbling guest, I must say that my sympathies were completely with the former. I considered him thoroughly justified in waving all the fists he wanted to. Review the facts, I mean to say. there he had been, lying in bed, thinking idly of whatever French cooks do think about when in bed, and he suddenly became aware of that frightful face at the window, a thing to jar the most phlegmatic. I know, I should hate to be lying in bed and have Gussie popping up like that. A chap's bedroom, you can't get away from it, is his castle. And he has every right to look askance if gargoyles come glaring in at him. While I stood musing thus, Aunt Dahlia, in her practical way, was coming straight to the point. What's all this? Anatole did a sort of Swedish exercise, starting at the base of the spine, carrying on through the shoulder blades, and finishing up among the back hair. Then he told her. In the chats I have heard with this Wonder Man, I have always found his English fluent, but a bit on the mixed side. If you remember, he was with Mrs. Bingo Little for a little time before coming to Brinkley, and no doubt he picked up a good deal from Bingo. Before that, he had been a couple of years with an American family at Nice, and had studied under their chauffeur, one of the Maloneys of Brooklyn. So, what with Bingo and what with Maloney, he is, as I say, a fluent, but a bit mixed. He spoke, in part, as follows. Hot dog! You ask me what it is. Listen, make some attention a little. Me, I have hit the hay, but I do not sleep so good, and presently I wake up and I look, and there is one who makes faces against me through the dashed window. Is that a pretty affair? Is that convenient? Is that what you think I like it? You jolly well mistake yourself. I am so mad it's a wet hen. And why not? I am somebody, isn't it? This is a bedroom. What? Not a house for some apes. Then, for what do blighters sit on my window so cool as a few cucumbers making some faces? Quite, I said. Dashed reasonable was my verdict. He threw another look at Gussie, and did exercise 2, the one where you clutch the moustache, give it a tug, and then start catching flies. Wait yet a little, I am not finished. I say, I see this type on my window making a few faces, but what then? Does he buzz off when I shout a cry, or leave me peaceable? Not on your life! He remained planted there, not giving any damns, and sit regarding me like a cat watching a duck. He make faces against me, and again he make faces against me, and the more I command that he should go to hell out of here, the more he do not get the hell out of here. He cries sometimes towards me, and I demand what is his desire, but he do not explain. Oh no, that arrives never. He does but shrug his head. What damn silliness! Is this amusing for me? You think I like it? I am not content with such folly. I think the poor much loony. Je me fiche de si peu effet, c'est idiot de faire contre le sur le frère. Tell the boot to go away! He's mad as some modular hatters! I must say, I thought he was making a jolly good case, and evidently Aunt Dahlia felt the same. She laid a quivering hand on his shoulder. I will, Monsieur Anatole, I will, she said, and I couldn't have believed that robust voice capable of sinking to such an absolute coo. More like a turtle dove calling to its mate than anything else. It's quite all right. She had said the wrong thing. He did exercise 3. All right. Nom du, nom du, nom du! The hell you say it's all right! Of what use you pull that stuff like that? Wait 1 half moment. Not yet quite so quick, my old sport. It is by no means all right. See yet again a little. It is some very different dishes of fish. I can make a few smooths with a rough, it is true, but I do not find it agreeable when one blade locks against me on my windows. That cannot do. A nice thing, no, I am a serious man. I do not wish a few locks on my windows. I enjoy my locks on my windows worse as any. It is very little all right. If such renegazoo is to arrive, I do not remain any longer in this house no more. I buzz off and do not stay planted. Sinister words, I had to admit, and I was not surprised that Aunt Dahlia, hearing them, should have uttered a cry like the wail of a master of hounds seeing a fox shot. Anatole had begun to wave his fists again at Gussie, and she now joined him. Seppings, who was puffing respectfully in the background, didn't actually wave his fists, but he gave Gussie a pretty austere look. It was plain to the thoughtful observer that this Fignotle, in getting on to that skylight, had done a mistaken thing. He couldn't have been more unpopular in the home of G.G. Simmons. Go away, you crazy loon! Cried Aunt Dahlia, in that ringing voice of hers which had once caused nervous members of the corn to lose stirrups and take tosses from the saddle. Gussie's reply was to waggle his eyebrows. I could read the message he was trying to convey. I think he means, I said, reasonable old Bertram, always trying to throw oil on the troubled W's. What if he does not, that if he does, he will fall down the side of the house and break his neck? Well, why not? Said Aunt Dahlia. I could see her point, of course, but it seemed to me that there might be a nearer solution. This skylight happened to be the only window in the house, which Uncle Tom had not festooned with his bally bars. I suppose he felt that if a burglar had the nerve to climb up as far as this, he deserved what was coming to him. If you opened the skylight, he could jump in. The idea got across. Steppings, how does the skylight open? With a pole, madame. Then get a pole, 2 poles, 10! And presently Gussie was mixing with the company. Like one of those chaps you read about in the papers. The wretched man seemed deeply conscious of his position. I must say Aunt Dahlia's bearing and demeanour did nothing to assist toward a restored composure. Of the amiability which she had exhibited when discussing this unhappy chump's activities with me over his fruit salad, no trace remained. And I was not surprised that speech more or less froze on the Finknottle's lips. It isn't often that Aunt Dahlia, normally as genial a bird as ever, encouraged a gaggle of hounds to get their noses down to it, lets her angry passions rise. But when she does, strong men climb trees and pull them up after them. Well, she said. In answer to this, all that Gussie could produce was a sort of strangled hiccough. Well? Aunt Dahlia's face grew darker. Hunting, if indulged in regularly over a period of years, is a pastime that seldom fails to lend a fairly deepish tinge to the patient's complexion. And her best friends could not have denied that even at normal times the relatives' map tended a little toward the crushed strawberry. But never had I seen it take on so pronounced a richness as now. She looked like a tomato struggling for self-expression. Well? Gussie tried hard, and for a moment it seemed as if something was going to come through, but in the end it turned out nothing more than a sort of death rattle. Oh, take him away, Bertie, and put ice on his head, said Aunt Dahlia, giving the thing up, and she turned to tackle what looked like the rather man-sized job of soothing Anatole, who was now carrying on a muttered conversation with himself in a rapid sort of way. Seeming to feel that the situation was one to which he could not do justice in bingo cum bologna Anglo-American, he had fallen back on his native tongue. Words like marmiton de dommage, pignouf, herbleu, rotisseur, were fluttering from him like bats out of a barn. Lost on me, of course, because though I sweated a bit at the Gallic language during the Cannes visit, I am still more or less in the escurvu of Aesage. I regretted this, for they sounded good. I assisted Gussie down the stairs. A cooler thinker than Aunt Dahlia, I had already guessed the hidden springs and motives which had led him to the roof, where she had seen only a cock-eyed reveller indulging himself in a drunken prank or whimsy. I had spotted the hunted fawn. Was Tuppy after you? I asked sympathetically. What I believe is called a Frisian shook him. He nearly got me up on the top landing. I shinned out through a passage window and scrambled along the top sort of ledge. That baffled him, what? Yes, but when I found I had stuck, the roof sloped down in all directions. I couldn't go back. I had to go on, crawling along this ledge. And then I found myself looking down the skylight. Who was that chap? That was Anatole, Aunt Dahlia's chef. French to the core. That explains why I couldn't make him understand. What asses these Frenchmen are. You don't seem able to grasp the simplest thing. You'd have thought if a chap saw a chap on a skylight, the chap would realise the chap wanted to be let in. But no, he just stood there, waving a few fists. Yes, silly idiot. Still, here I am. Here you are, yes, for the moment. Eh? I was thinking that Tuppy is probably lurking somewhere. He'll eat like a lamb in springtime. What shall I do? I considered this. Sneak back to your room and barricade the door. That is the manly policy. Suppose that's where he's lurking. In that case, move elsewhere. But on arrival at the room, it transpired that Tuppy, if anywhere, was infesting some other portion of the house. Gussie shot in, and I heard the key turn, and, feeling that there was no more that I could do in that quarter, I returned to the dining room for further fruit salad and a quiet think. And I had barely filled my plate when the door opened and Aunt Dahlia came in. She sank into a chair, looking a bit shop-worn. Give me a drink, Bertie. What sort? Any sort, so long as it's strong. Approach Bertram Wooster along these lines, and you catch him at his best. St. Bernard dogs doing the square thing by Alpine travellers could not have bustled about more assiduously. I failed the order, and for some moments nothing was to be heard but the sloshing sound of an aunt restoring her tissues. Shove it down, Aunt Dahlia, I said sympathetically. These things take it out of one, don't they? You've had a toughish time, no doubt, soothing Anatole. I proceeded, helping myself to anchovy paste on toast. Everything's pretty smooth now, I trust. She gazed at me in a long, lingering sort of way, her brow wrinkled as if in thought. Attila, she said at last. That's the name, Attila, the Hun. Eh? I was trying to think who you reminded me of. Somebody who went about stewing ruin and desolation, breaking up homes, which, until he had come along, had been happy and peaceful. Attila is the man, it's amazing, she said, drinking me in once more. To look at you, one would think you were just an ordinary sort of amiable idiot, certifiable perhaps, but quite harmless. Yet, in reality, you are worse a scourge than the Black Death. I tell you, Bertie, when I contemplate you, I seem to come up against all the underlying sorrow and horror of life with such a thud that I feel as if I'd walked into a lamppost. Pained and surprised, I would have spoken, but the stuff I had thought was anchovy paste had turned out to be something far more gooey and adhesive. It seemed to wrap itself round the tongue and impede utterance, like a gag. And while I was still endeavouring to clear the vocal cords for action, she went on. Did you realize what you started when you sent that spink bottle man down here? As regards to this, he's getting blotto and turning the prize-giving ceremonies at Market Salisbury Grammar School into a sort of two-reel comic film, I will say nothing, for frankly I enjoyed it. But when he comes leering at Anatole through skylights, just after I had with infinite pain and tact induced him to withdraw his notice, and makes him so temperamental that he won't hear of staying on after tomorrow. The paste stuff gave way. I was able to speak. What? Yes, Anatole goes tomorrow, and I suppose poor old Tom will have indigestion for the rest of his life. And that is not all. I've just seen Angela. She tells me she is engaged to this bottle. Temporarily, yes, I had to admit. Temporarily, she will be blowed. She's definitely engaged to him and talks with a sort of hideous coolness of getting married in October. So there it is. If the prophet Job were to walk into the room at this moment, I could sit swapping hard-luck stories with him till bedtime. No, not that Job was in my class, Job. Not that Job was in my class. He had boils. Where? What are boils? Dashed painful, I understand. Nonsense. I'd take all the boils on the market in exchange for my troubles. Can't you realize the position? I've lost the best cook to England. My husband, poor dear soul, will probably die of dyspepsia, and my only daughter, for whom I have dreamed such a wonderful future, is engaged to be married to an inebriated nude fancier. And you talk about boils. I corrected her on a small point. I don't absolutely talk about boils. I merely mentioned that Job had them. Yes, I agree with you, Aunt Dahlia, that things are not looking too uja cum spief at the moment. But be of good cheer. A Worcester is seldom baffled for more than once. You rather expect to be coming along shortly with another of your schemes, at any minute. She sighed resignedly. I thought as much. Well, it needed but this. I don't see how things could possibly be worse than they are. But no doubt you will succeed in making them so. Your genius and insight will find the way. Carry on, Bertie. Carry on. I'm past caring now. I shall even find a faint interest in seeing what darker and profounder abysses of hell you can plunge this home. Go to it, lad. What's that stuff you're eating? I find it a little difficult to classify. Some sort of paste on toast, rather like glue flavored with beef extract. Gimme, said Aunt Dahlia listlessly. Be careful how you chew, I advised. It sticketh closer than a brother. Yes, Jeeves. The man had materialized on the carpet, absolutely noiseless as usual. A note for you, sir. A note for me, Jeeves. A note for you, sir. From whom, Jeeves? From Miss Bassett, sir. From whom, Jeeves? From Miss Bassett, sir. From Miss Bassett, Jeeves? From Miss Bassett, sir. At this point, Aunt Dahlia, who had taken one nibble at her whatever it was on toast and laid it down, begged us, a little fretfully, I thought, for heaven's sake, to cut out the cross-talk vaudeville stuff, as she has had enough to bear already, without having to listen to us doing our imitation of the two Macs. Always willing to oblige, I dismissed Jeeves with a nod. He flickered for a moment and was gone. Many a spectre would have been less slippy. But what, I mused, toying with the envelope, can this female be writing to me about? Why not open the damn thing and see? A very excellent idea, I said, and did so. And if you are interested in my movements, proceeded Aunt Dahlia, heading for the door, I propose to go to my room, do some yogi deep breathing, and try to forget. Quite, I said absently, skimming P.I. And then, as I turned over, a sharp howl broke from my lips, causing Aunt Dahlia to shy like a startled mustang. Don't do it, she exclaimed, quivering in every limb. But dash it, what a pest you are, you miserable object, she sighed. I remember years ago when you were in your cradle, being left alone with you one day, and you nearly swallowed your rubber comforter and started turning purple. And I, yes, that I was, took it out and saved your life. Let me tell you, young Bertie, I will go very hard with you if you ever swallow a rubber comforter again when only I am by to aid. But, dash it, I cried, do you know what's happened? Madeline Bassett says she's going to marry me. I hope she keeps it fine for you, said the relative, and passed from the room looking like something out of an Edgar Allan Poe story. And that is the end of chapter 20. And as we can see, things continue to spiral out of control. We got Tuppy talked down from the proverbial ledge, well, proverbial and literal ledge, I should say, and Anatole is returning his notice, because there's only so much a Frenchman can take. And I will say, that little span of French expletives mixed in with all the broken English and like mixed references of English, European, and other slangs, I was kind of proud of that. That came out pretty well. It could just be that the secret is to sound angry and get it thrown out. Then no one can say how bad it sounds. And yes, it is good that actually Aunt Dahlia regularly calls out Bertie. Like it seems like half of the things she said are actual insults against him. And they always have been. So that is a nice little bit of consistency. She does not like her nephew. And she sticks to her guns, sometimes savagely. Straight up saying he's Attila the Hun, bringing ruin to the households in the countryside, worse than the Black Plague, is cutting to the quick rather deeply. But that's kind of why the humor in this book works so well, is we've got the entire gamut. Like, you've got the seemingly innocent idiot Bertie, and then you've got the actual, like, venom dripping from every word Aunt Dahlia. Like, it goes all over the place, and sometimes it feels like real deep-seated hatred in the middle of a lighthearted comedy. And it just hits perfectly. Alright, let's see. How long is this next chapter? So we're running, I think we only have 3 left. Yeah, we end on chapter 23. So... and this next one is reasonably long. Yeah, we'll go ahead and power through it, and then we'll take a break after this chapter. It should work out nicely there. We still have about 20 minutes before our hour mark. So... let's continue, because there are only 3 chapters left. We've seen Jeeves just long enough to deliver a fateful letter. And for all we know, things aren't going to be getting better. It's looking a nearer and nearer thing, unless some sort of magic can be pulled out in the very last chapter. So, this is going to get something... rather interesting. But it does look like things are going to continue to get worse, because now Bertie is apparently engaged. The little bit of him saying that he was in love with Bassett is coming back to bite him. The chickens have come home to roost. So, let's continue now with chapter 21. I don't suppose I was looking so dashed, unlike something out of an Edgar Allan Poe story myself, for, as you can readily imagine, the news item which I had just recorded had got in amongst me properly. If the Bassett, in the belief that the Wooster heart had long been hers and was waiting ready to be scooped in on demand, had decided to take up her option, I should, as a man of honour and sensibility, have no choice but to come across and kick in. The matter was obviously not one that could be straightened out with a curt noli proscui. All the evidence, therefore, seemed to point to the fact that the doom had come upon me and, what was more, had come to stay. And yet, though I would be idle to pretend that my grip on the situation was quite the grip I would have liked it to be, I did not despair of arriving at a solution. A lesser man caught in this awful snare would no doubt have thrown in the towel at once and ceased to struggle. But the whole point about the Woosters is that they are not lesser men. By way of a start, I read the note again. Not that I had any hope that a second perusal would enable me to place a different construction on its contents, but it helped to fill in while the brain was limbering up. I then, to assist thought, had another go at the fruit salad, and, in addition, ate a slice of sponge cake. And it was as I passed on to the cheese that the machinery started working. I saw what had to be done. I love how, whenever there's something serious going on, he's like, the wheels are spinning, I'm working fervently, feverishly. Oh, but I was eating. Or, oh, I had time to have a cigarette. Or 3. Or, had a quick drink. The priorities of this man are impeccable. To the question which had been exercising the mind, viz., can Bertram cope? I was now able to reply with a confident absolutely. The great wheeze of these occasions of dirty work at the crossroads is not to lose your head, but to keep cool and try to find the ringleaders. Once find the ringleaders, and you know where you are. The ringleader here was plainly the Bassett. It was she who had started the whole imbroglio by chucking Gussie, and it was clear that before anything could be done to solve and clarify, she must be induced to revise her views and take him on again. This would put Angela back into circulation, and that would cause Toppy to simmer down a bit, and then we could begin to get somewhere. I decided that as soon as I had had another morsel of cheese, he's going at it again, I would seek out this Bassett, and be pretty eloquent. And at this moment in, she came. I might have foreseen that she would be turning up shortly. I mean to say, hearts may ache, but if they know that there's a cold collation set out in the dining room, they are pretty sure to come popping in sooner or later. Her eyes, as she entered the room, were fixed on the salmon mayonnaise, and she would no doubt have made a beeline for it and started getting hers, had I not, in the emotion of seeing her, dropped a glass of the best with which I was endeavouring to bring about a calmer frame of mind. The noise caused her to turn, and, for an instant, embarrassment supervened. A slight flush mantled the cheek, and the eyes popped a bit. "Oh," she said. "I have always found that there's nothing that helps you ease your mind over one of those awkward moments like a spot of stage business. Find something to do with your hands, and it's half the battle." I grabbed a plate and hastened forward. "A touch of salmon?" "Thank you. With a suspicion of salad, if you please. And to drink, name the poison." "I think I would like a little orange juice." She gave a gulp. Not at the orange juice, I don't mean, but because she hadn't got it yet, but at all the tender associations those two words provoked. It was as if someone had mentioned spaghetti to the relict of an Italian organ grinder. Her face flushed a deeper shade. She registered anguish, and I saw that she was no longer within the sphere of practical politics to try to confine the conversation to neutral topics, like cold-boiled salmon. So did she, I imagine, for when I, as preliminary to getting down to brass tacks, said she said too. Simultaneously, the brace of ers clashing in mid-air. "I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. You were saying. No, please go on. Oh, righto." I straightened the tie, my habit when in this girl's society, and had at it. "With reference to yours of even date." She flushed again, and took a rather strained forkful of salmon. "You got my note?" "Yes, I got your note." "I gave it to Jeeves to give it to you." "Yes, and he gave it to me. That's how I got it." There was another silence, and as she was plainly shrinking from talking turkey, I was reluctantly compelled to do so. I mean, somebody had got to. Too dash silly, a male and a female in opposition, simply standing eating salmon and cheese at one another without a word. "Yes, I got it all right." "I see. You got it." "Yes, I got it. I've just been reading it, and what I was rather wanting to ask you, if we happened to run into each other, was, well, what about it?" "What about it?" "That's what I want to say. What about it?" "But it was quite clear." "Oh, yes, quite perfectly clear. Very well expressed and all that, but I mean, deeply sensible of the honour and so forth, but, well, dash it!" She had polished off a salmon, and now put the plate down. "Fruit salad?" "No, thank you." "A spot of pie?" "No, thanks." "One of those glue things on toast?" "No, thank you." She took a cheese straw. I found a cold egg which I had overlooked. Then I said, I mean to say, just as she said, I think I know. And there was another collision. I beg your pardon, I'm sorry. Do go on. No, you go on. I waved my cold leg courteously to indicate that she had the floor, and she started again. I think I know what you're trying to say. You're surprised. Yes. You are thinking of exactly Mr. Fignoddle, the very man. You find that I've done hard to understand. Absolutely. I don't wonder. I do. And yet it is quite simple. She took another cheese straw. She seemed to like cheese straws. Quite simple, really. I want to make you happy. Dash decent of you. I'm going to devote the rest of my life to making you happy. A very matey scheme. I can at least do that. But may I be quite frank with you, Bertie? Oh, rather. Then I must tell you this. I am fond of you. I will marry you. I will do my best to make you a good wife. But my affection for you can never be the flame-like passion I felt for Augustus. Just the very point I was working round to. There, as you say, is the snag. Why not chuck the whole idea of hitching up with me? Wash it out altogether, I mean. If you love old Gussie. No longer. Oh, come. No. What happened this afternoon has killed my love. A smear of ugliness has been drawn across a thing of beauty, and I could never feel towards him as I did. That's all what she meant, of course. Gussie had bunged his heart at her feet. She'd picked it up, and almost immediately after doing so had discovered that he had been stewed to the eyebrows all the time. The shock must have been severe. No girl likes to feel that a chap has got to be thoroughly plastered before he can ask her to marry him. It wounds the pride. Nevertheless, I persevered. But have you considered, I said, that you may have got a wrong line on Gussie's performance this afternoon? Admitted that all the evidence points to a more sinister theory. What price him simply having got a touch of the sun? Chaps do get touches of the sun, you know, especially when the weather's hot. She looked at me, and I saw that she was putting in a bit of the old drenched irises stuff. It was like you to say that, Bertie. I respect you for it. Oh, no. Yes. You have a splendid, chivalrous soul. Not a bit. Yes, you have. You remind me of Cyrano. Who? Cyrano de Bergerac. The chap with the nose. Yes. I can't say I was any too pleased. I felt the old beak furtively. It was a bit on the prominent side, perhaps, but dash it, it's not in the Cyrano class. It began to look as if the next thing this girl would do would be to compare me to Schnozzle the Runt. He loved, but pleaded another's cause. Oh, I see what you mean now. I like you for that, Bertie. It was fine of you, fine and big, but it is no use. There are things which kill love. I can never forget Augustus, but my love for him is dead. I will be your wife. Well, one has to be civil. Right-ho, I said. Thanks awfully. Then the dialogue sort of poofed out once more, and we stood eating cheese straws and cold eggs respectively in silence. There seemed to exist some little uncertainty as to what the next move was. Unfortunately, before embarrassment could do much more supervening, Angela came in, and this broke up the meeting. Then Bassett announced our engagement, and Angela kissed her and said she hoped she would be very, very happy. And the Bassett kissed her, and said she hoped she would be very, very happy with Gussie. And Angela said she was sure she would, because Augustus was such a dear. And the Bassett kissed her again, and Angela kissed her again, and in a word, the whole thing got so bally feminine that I was glad to edge away. I would have been glad to do so, of course, in any case, for if ever there was a moment when it was up to Bertram to think, and think hard, this moment was that moment. It was, it seemed to me, the end. Not even on the occasion some years earlier, when I had inadvertently become betrothed to Tuppy's frightful cousin Honoria, had I experienced a deeper sense of being waist-high in the gumbo and about to sink without a trace. I wandered out into the garden, smoking a tortured gasper, with the iron well embedded in the soul, and I had fallen into a sort of trance, trying to picture what it would be like having the Bassett on the premises for the rest of my life, and at the same time, if you follow me, trying not to picture what it would be like, when I charged into something which might have been a tree, but was not, being, in point of fact, Jeeves. I beg your pardon, sir, he said. I should have moved to one side. I did not reply. I stood looking at him in silence, for the sight of him had opened up a new line of thought. This Jeeves now, I reflected, I had formed the opinion that he had lost his grip, and was no longer the force he had been. But was it not possible, I asked myself, that I might be mistaken? Start him off, exploring avenues, and might he not discover one through which I would be enabled to sneak off to safety, leaving no hard feelings behind? I found myself answering that it was quite on the cards that he might. After all, his head still bulged out at the back as of old. One noted in the eyes the same intelligent glitter. Mind you, after what had passed between us in the matter of that white mess jacket with the brass buttons, I was not prepared absolutely to hand over to the man. I would, of course, merely take him into consultation. But, recalling some of his earlier triumphs, the Sibley case, the episode of my Aunt Agatha and the dog Mackintosh, and the smoothly handled affair of Uncle George and the barmaid's niece, were a few that sprang to my mind. I felt justified, at least, in offering him the opportunity of coming to the aid of the young master in his hour of peril. But before proceeding further, there was one thing that had got to be understood between us, and understood clearly. "Jeeves," I said, "a word with you." "Sir?" "I am up against it a bit, Jeeves." "I am sorry to hear that, sir. Can I be of any assistance?" "Quite possibly you can, if you have not lost your grip. Tell me frankly, Jeeves, are you in pretty good shape mentally?" "Yes, sir." "Still eating plenty of fish?" "Yes, sir." "Then it may be all right. But there is just one point before I begin. In the past, when you have contrived to extricate self or some pal from some little difficulty, you have frequently shown a disposition to take advantage of my gratitude to gain some private end. Those purple socks, for instance. Also the +4s and the old Etonian spats. Choosing your moment with subtle cunning, you came to me when I was weakened by relief, and got me to get rid of them. What I am saying now is that if you are successful on the present occasion, there must be no rot of that description about that mess jacket of mine." "Very good, sir." "You will not come to me when all is over and ask me to jettison the jacket?" "Certainly not, sir." "On that understanding, then, I will carry on. Jeeves, I'm engaged." "I hope you will be very happy, sir." "Don't be an ass. I'm engaged to Miss Bassett." "Indeed, sir. I was not aware." "Nor was I. It came as a complete surprise. However, there it is. The official intimation was in that note you brought me." "Odd, sir." "What is?" "Odd, sir, that the contents of that note should have been as you describe. It seemed to me that Miss Bassett, when she handed me the communication, was far from being in a happy frame of mind." "She is far from being in a happy frame of mind. You don't suppose she really wants to marry me, do you?" "Pshaw, Jeeves! Can't you see that this is simply another of those bally gestures which are rapidly rendering Brinkley Court a hell for man and beast? Dash all gestures is my view." "Yes, sir." "Well, what's to be done?" "You feel that Miss Bassett, despite what has occurred, still retains a fondness for Mr. Fingnoddle, sir?" "She's pining for him." "In that case, sir, surely the best plan would be to bring about a reconciliation between them." "How? You see, you stand silent and twiddle the fingers. You are stumped." "No, sir. If I twiddled my fingers, it was merely to assist thought." "Then continue twiddling." "It will not be necessary, sir." "You don't mean you've got a bite already?" "Yes, sir." "You astound me, Jeeves. Let's have it." "The device which I have in mind is one that I have already mentioned to you, sir." "When did you ever mention any device to me?" "If you will throw back your mind to the evening of our arrival, sir. You were good enough to inquire of me if I had any plan to put forward with a view to bring Miss Angela and Mr. Glossop together, and I ventured to suggest—" "Good Lord, not the old fire alarm thing!" "Precisely, sir." "You're still sticking to that?"
"Yes, sir."
It shows how much the ghastly blow I had received had shaken me when I say that, instead of dismissing the proposal with the courage to Shaw, or something like that, I found myself speculating as to whether there might not be something in it after all. When he had first mooted this fire alarm scheme of his, I had sat upon it, if you remember, with the maximum promptitude and vigour. Rotten was the adjective I had employed to describe it, and you may recall that I mused a bit sadly, considering the idea conclusive proof of the general breakdown of a once fine mind. But now, it somehow began to look as if it might have possibilities. The fact of the matter was that I had about reached the stage when I was prepared to try anything once, however goofy. "Just run through that wheeze again, Jeeves," I said thoughtfully. "I remember thinking it cuckoo, but it may be that I missed some of the finer shades."
"Your criticism of it at the time, sir, was that it was too elaborate, but I do not think it is so in reality. As I see it, sir, the occupants of the house, hearing the fire bell ring, will suppose that a conflagration has broken out."
I nodded. One could follow the train of thought. "Yes, that seems reasonable."
"Whereupon Mr. Glossop will hasten to save Miss Angela." while Mr. Finknottle performs the same office for Miss Bassett.
Is that based on psychology?
Yes, sir. Possibly you may recollect that it was an axiom of the late Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's fictional detective Sherlock Holmes that the instinct of everyone, upon an alarm of fire, is to save the object dearest to them.
We read that. That actual story. It seems to me that there's a grave danger of seeing Puppy come up carrying a steak and kidney pie. But resume, Jeeves, resume. You think that this would clean everything up?
The relations of the two young couples could scarcely continue distant after such an occurrence, sir.
Perhaps you're right, but dash it, if we go ringing fire bells in the night watches, shan't we scare half the domestic staff into fits? There's one of the housemaids, Jane, I believe, who already skips like the high hills if I so much as come near her, on unexpectedly round a corner.
A neurotic girl, sir, I agree. I have noticed her. But by acting promptly, we should avoid such a contingency. The entire staff, with the exception of Monsieur Anatole, will be at the ball at Kingham Manor tonight.
Of course! That just shows the condition that this has reduced me to. Forget my own name next. Well then, let's just try to envisage. Bong goes the bell, Gussie rushes and grabs the basset. Wait! Why shouldn't she simply walk downstairs?
You are overlooking the effect of sudden fire alarm on the feminine temperament, sir.
That's true.
Miss Bassett's impulse, I would imagine, sir, would be to leap from her window.
Well, that's worse. We don't want her spread out in a sort of puree on the lawn. It seems to me that the flaw in this scheme of yours, Jeeves, is that it is going to litter the garden with mangled corpses.
No, sir. You will recall that Mr. Travers' fear of burglars has caused him to have stout bars fixed to all the windows.
Of course, yes. Well, it sounds all right, I said, though still a bit doubtfully. Quite possibly it may come off, but I have a feeling that it will slip up somewhere. However, I am in no position to cavil at even 100 to 1 shot. I will adopt this policy of yours, Jeeves, though, as I say, with misgivings. At what hour would you suggest bonging the bell?
Not before midnight, sir.
That is to say, sometime after midnight.
Yes, sir.
Right-ho, then. At 12:30 on the dot, I will bong.
Very good, sir.
And that brings us to the end of chapter 21. And yeah, you're right. This is probably the most clear and prescient thought that we've had out of Bertie yet. That is terrifying. So, in the bit of the terror of upcoming nuptials, Bertie has fled and found his safe haven with Jeeves, and has decided that, you know what, now is the time, that whether or not he's actually gone round the bend or not, it is best to just try whatever will come about, and see if something will stick. And so we come to, as Jeeves had said, the Sherlock scheme. The setting a fire, and the culprit will go into the fire for what is most important to them. In this case, not a pile of evidence, not some letters. It will be the fiancés. We can hope, anyway. We wish. We can really, really pin our hopes on this one. There's not a whole lot of sensible thought going on with this entire household. It's not just Bertie who's a little bit loopy. But we can hope that things might play out nicely. Alright, we have 2 chapters left. They are of a decent size. We are about on pace. We might finish a little early tonight, but nothing too crazy. So, let's go ahead and take a few minutes now and have a break, stretch our legs, top up our drinks, and we'll be back to finish up Right-ho, Jeeves, right when we get back. All right, we are back. So, we've got 2 chapters left tonight. 22, where, hopefully, Jeeves' ploy is going to be put underway, and hopefully, we can cross our fingers, and in 23 we will get the resolution, where maybe things will settle in nicely. Hopefully. Maybe. At this point, it could go either way, and I'd be satisfied. It could end with the house burning down, and it would still be on point. But I rather like to think that Jeeves is going to finesse things into the best possible conclusion, and no one will realize that it was him. Birdie will inevitably claim credit. But everyone will know. We'll know. We will know. So, let's dive back in. We've got a little bit less than 10, right about 10% of the book left tonight. So we are right on pace to be having a about spot on timing. All right, chapter 22. I don't know why it is, but there's something about the rural districts that, after dark, that always has a rummy effect on me. In London, I can stay out till all hours and come home with the milk without a tremor. But put me in the garden of a country house after the strength of the company has gone to roost, and the place is shut up, and a sort of goosey flesh feeling steals over me. The night wind stirs the treetops, twigs crack, bushes rustle, and before I know where I am, the morale has gone foot, and I'm expecting the family ghost to come sneaking up behind me, making groaning noises. Dashed unpleasant, the whole thing, and if you think it improves matters to know that you are shortly about to ring the loudest fire bell in England and start an all-hands to the pumps panic in that quiet, darkened house, you err. I knew all about the Brinkley fire bell, the dickens of a row it makes. Uncle Tom, in addition to not liking burglars, is a bloke who has always objected to the idea of being cooked in his sleep. So, when he bought the place, he saw to it that the fire bell should be something that might give you a heart failure, but which you couldn't possibly mistake for the drowsy chirping of a sparrow in the ivy. When I was a kid and spent my holidays at Brinkley, we used to have fire drills after closing time, and many is the night I've had it jerk me out of the dreamless like the last trump. I confess that the recollection of what this bell could do when it buckled down to it gave me pause as I stood that night at 12:30 p.m., prompt beside the outhouse where it was located. At 12:30 p.m.? British timekeeping, I assume. The sight of the rope against the whitewashed wall and the thought of the bloodsome uproar which was about to smash the peace of the night into hash served to deepen that rummy feeling to which I have alluded. Moreover, now that I had had time to meditate upon it, I was more than ever defeatist about this scheme of Jeeves's. Jeeves seemed to take it for granted that Gussie and Tuppy, faced with a hideous fate, would have no thought beyond saving the Bassett and Angela. I could not bring myself to share this sunny confidence. I mean to say, I know how moments when they're faced with a hideous fate affects chaps. I remember Freddie Widgeon, one of the most chivalrous birds in the drones, telling me how there was an alarm of fire once at a seaside hotel where he was staying, and so far from rushing about saving women, he was down the escape within 10 seconds of the kickoff, his mind concerned with but one thing, vis-a-vis the personal well-being of F. Widgeon. As far as any idea of doing the delicately nurtured a bit of good went, he tells me he was prepared to stand underneath and catch them in blankets, but no more. Why, then, should this not be so with Augustus Finknottle and Hildebrand Glossop? Such were my thoughts, as I stood toying with the rope, and I believe I should have turned the whole thing up had it not been that at this juncture there floated into my mind a picture of the Basset, hearing that bell for the first time, coming as a wholly new experience. It would probably startle her into a decline. And so agreeable was this reflection that I waited no longer but seized the rope, braced the feet, and snapped into it. Damn, Bertie, that's kind of mean there. Well, as I say, I hadn't been expecting that bell to hush things up to any great extent. Nor did it. The last time I had heard it, I had been in my room on the other side of the house, and even so, it had hoiked me out of bed as if something had exploded under me. Standing close to it like this, I got the full force and meaning of the thing. I've never heard anything like it in my puff. I rather enjoy a bit of noise, as a general rule. I remember Cats Meet Potter Pierbright bringing a police radio into the drones one night and loosing it off behind my chair. A police rattle, sorry. And I just lay back and closed my eyes with a pleasant smile, like someone in a box at the opera. And the same applies to any time when my Aunt Acula's son, young Thos, put a match to the parcel of a Guy Fawkes Day fireworks to see what would happen. But the Brinkley Court fire bell was too much for me. I gave about half a dozen tugs, and then, feeling that enough was enough, sauntered round to the front lawn to ascertain what solid results had been achieved. Brinkley Court had given of its best. A glance told me that we were playing to capacity. The eye, roving to and fro, noted here Uncle Tom in a purple dressing gown. There, Aunt Dahlia in the old blue and yellow. It also fell upon Anatole, Tuppy, Gussie, Angela, the Basset, and Jeeves, in the order named. They were all present and correct. But, and this was what caused me immediate concern, I could detect no sign whatever that there had been any rescue work going on. What I had been hoping, of course, was to see Tuppy bending solicitously over Angela in one corner, while Gussie fanned the Basset with a towel in the other, instead of which the Basset was one of the group which included Aunt Dahlia and Uncle Tom, and seemed to be busy trying to make Anatole see the bright side. While Angela and Gussie were, respectively, leaning against the sundial with a peeved look and sitting on the grass rubbing a barked shin. Tuppy was walking up and down the path all by himself. A disturbing picture, you will admit. It was with a rather imperious gesture that I summoned Jeeves to my side. Well, Jeeves? Sir? I eyed him sternly. Sir, forsooth! It's no good saying sir. It's no good saying sir, Jeeves. Look around you. See for yourself. Your scheme has proved a bust. Certainly, it would appear that matters have not arranged themselves quite as we anticipated, sir. We? As I had anticipated, sir. That's more like it. Didn't I tell you it would be a flop? I remember that you did seem dubious, sir. Dubious is no word for it, Jeeves. I hadn't a scrap of faith in the idea from the start. When you first mooted it, I said it was rotten, and I was right. I'm not blaming you, Jeeves. It is not your fault that you have sprained your brain, but after this, forgive me if I hurt your feelings, Jeeves. I shall know better than to allow you to handle any but the simplest and most elementary problems. It is best to be candid about this, don't you think? Kindness to be frank and straightforward. Certainly, sir. I mean, the surgeon's life, what? Precisely, sir. I consider, if you will pardon me for interrupting you, sir, I fancy Mrs. Travers is endeavouring to attract your attention. And at this moment a ring hoy, which could have proceeded only from the relative in question, assured me that this view was correct. Just step this way a moment, Attila, if you don't mind, boomed that well-known and, under certain conditions, well-loved voice, and I moved over. I was not feeling unmixedly at my ease. For the first time it was beginning to steal upon me that I had not prepared a really good story in support of my questionable behaviour in ringing fire bells at such an hour.
and I have known Aunt Dahlia to express herself with a hearty freedom upon far smaller provocation. She exhibited, however, no signs of violence. More a sort of frozen calm, if you know what I mean. You could see that she was a woman who had suffered. "Well, Bertie dear," she said, "here we all are." "Quite," I said guardedly. "Nobody missing, is there?" "I don't think so." "Splendid. So much healthier for us out in the open like this than frowsting in bed. I had just dropped off when you did your bell-ringing act, for it was you, my sweet child, who rang that bell, was it not?" "I did ring the bell, yes." "Any particular reason? Or just on a whim?" "I thought there was a fire." "What gave you that impression, dear?" "I thought I saw flames." "Well, darling." "Where? Tell Aunt Dahlia." "In one of the windows." "I see. So we've all been dragged out of bed and scared rigid because you have been seeing things." Here Uncle Tom made a noise like a cork coming out of a bottle, and Anatole, whose moustache had hit a new low, said something about some apes, and if I am not mistaken, a rogomere, whatever that is. I admit I was mistaken. I am sorry. "Don't apologize, ducky. Can't you see how pleased we all are? What are you doing out here, anyway?" "Just taking a stroll." "I see. And you are proposing to continue your stroll?" "No, I think I'll go in now." "That's fine." "Because I was thinking of going in too, and I don't believe I could sleep knowing you were out here giving rein to that all-powerful imagination of yours. And the next thing that would happen would be that you would think you saw a pink elephant sitting in the drawing-room windowsill and start throwing bricks at it. Well, come on, Tom. The entertainment seems to be over. But wait, the Newt King wishes a word with us. Yes, Mr. Fink-Noddle?" Gussie, as he joined our little group, seemed upset about something. "I say." "Say on, Augustus." "I say, what are we going to do?" "Speaking for myself, I intend to return to bed." "But the door's shut." "What door?" "The front door. Somebody must have shut it." "Then I shall open it." "But it won't open." "Then I shall try another door." "But all the other doors are shut." "What? Who shut them?" "I don't know." "I advance a theory." "The wind?" Aunt Dahlia's eyes met mine. "Don't try at me too high," she begged. "Not now, precious." And indeed, even as I spoke, it did strike me that the night was pretty still. Uncle Tom said we must get in through a window. Aunt Dahlia sighed a bit. "How? Could Lloyd George do it? Could Winston do it? Could Baldwin do it? No, not since you had those bars of yours put on." "Well, well, well. God bless my soul. Ring the bell, then." "The fire bell?" "The doorbell." "To what end, Thomas? There's nobody in the house. The servants are all in the Kingham." "But, confound it, we can't stop out here all night."
"Can't we? You just watch us. There is nothing, literally nothing, which a country house party can't do with Attila here operating on the premises. Seppings presumably took the back door key with him. We must just amuse ourselves till he comes back."
Tuppy made a suggestion.
"Why not take one of the cars and drive over to Kingham and get the key from Seppings?"
It went well. No questions about that. For the first time, a smile lit up Aunt Dahlia's drawn face. Uncle Tom grunted approvingly. Anatole said something in Provençal that sounded complimentary, and I thought I detected even on Angela's map a slight softening.
"A very excellent idea," said Aunt Dahlia. "One of the best. Nip round to the garage at once."
After Tuppy had gone, some extremely flattering things were said about his intelligence and resource, and there was a disposition to draw rather invidious comparisons between him and Bertram. Painful for me, of course, but the ordeal didn't last long, for it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes before he was with us again. Tuppy seemed perturbed.
"I say, it's all off."
"Why?"
"The garage is locked."
"Unlock it."
"I haven't the key." "Shout then and wake Waterbury." "Who's Waterbury?" "The chauffeur, ass! He sleeps over the garage."
"But he's gone to dance at the Kingham." It was the final wallop. Until this moment, Aunt Dahlia had been able to preserve her frozen calm. The dam now burst. The years rolled away from her, and she was once more the Dahlia Wooster of the old Yoicks and Tantivy days. The emotional, free-speaking girl who had so often risen in her stirrups to yell derogatory personalities at people who were heading hounds.
"Curse all dancing chauffeurs! What on earth does a chauffeur want to dance for? I mistrusted that man from the start. Something told me he was a dancer. Well, this finishes it. We're out here till breakfast time. If those blasted servants come back here before 8 o'clock, I shall be vastly surprised."
You won't get Seppings away from a dance till you throw him out. I know him. The jazz will go to his head, and he'll start clapping and demanding encores till his hands blister. Damn all dancing butlers! What is Brinkley Court? A respectable English country house, or a crimson dancing school? One might as well be living in the middle of a Russian ballet. Well, all right, if we must stay out here, we must. We are all to be frozen stiff, except... Here she directed at me not one of her friendliest glances. Except dear old Attila, who is, I observe, well and warmly clad. We will resign ourselves to the prospect of freezing to death like the babes in the wood, merely expressing a dying wish that our old pal Attila will see that we are covered with leaves. No doubt he will also toll that fire bell of his as a mark of respect. And what might you want, my good man? She broke off, stood glaring at Jeeves. During the latter portion of her address, he had been standing by in a respectful manner, endeavouring to catch the speaker's eye.
If I might make a suggestion, madame?
I am not saying that in the course of our long association I have always found myself able to view Jeeves with approval. There are aspects of his character which have frequently caused coldness to arise between us. He is one of those fellows who, if you give them a thingamy, take a what do you call it, his work is often raw, and he has been known to allude to me as mentally negligible more than once. As I have shown, it has been my painful task to squelch in him a tendency to get uppish, and treat the young master as a serf or peon. These are grave defects. So Jeeves does call Bertie mentally negligible. Good to know that there's a little bit of reasonable thought going on between the two of them. But one thing I have never failed to hand the man, he is magnetic. There is about him something that seems to soothe and hypnotize. To the best of my knowledge, he has never encountered a charging rhinoceros, but should this contingency occur, I have no doubt that the animal, meeting his eye, would check itself in mid-stride, roll over, and lie purring with its legs in the air. At any rate, he calmed down Aunt Dahlia. The nearest thing to a charging rhinoceros in under 5 seconds. He just stood there, looking respectful, and though I didn't time the thing, not having a stopwatch on me, I should say it wasn't more than 3 seconds and a quarter before her whole manner underwent an astounding change for the better. She melted before one's eyes. Jeeves, you haven't got an idea?
Yes, madame.
That great brain of yours has really clicked as ever in our hour of need.
Yes, madame.
Jeeves, said Aunt Dahlia in a shaking voice, I am sorry I spoke so abruptly. I was not myself. I might have known that you would not come simply trying to make conversation. Tell us this idea of yours, Jeeves. Join our little group of thinkers and let us hear what you have to say. Make yourself at home, Jeeves, and give us the good word. Can you really get us out of this mess?
Yes, madame, if one of the gentlemen would be willing to ride a bicycle.
A bicycle?
There is a bicycle in the gardener's shed in the kitchen garden, madame. Possibly one of the gentlemen might feel disposed to ride over to Kingham Manor and procure the back-door key from Mr. Seppings.
Splendid, Jeeves.
Thank you, madame.
Wonderful.
Thank you, madame.
Attila, said Aunt Dahlia, turning and speaking in a quiet and authoritative manner. I had been expecting it. From the very moment those ill-judged words had passed the fellow's lips, I had had a presentiment that a determined effort would be made to elect me as the goat, and I braced myself to resist and obstruct. And as I was about to do so, while I was in the very act of summoning up all my eloquence to protest that I don't know how to ride a bike, and couldn't possibly learn in the brief time at my disposal, I'm dashed if the man didn't go and nip me in the bud.
Yes, madame, Mr. Wooster would perform the task admirably. He is an expert cyclist. He has often boasted to me of his triumphs on the wheel.
I hadn't done anything of the sort. It's simply monstrous how one's words get twisted. All I had ever done was to mention to him, casually, just as an interesting item of information, one day in New York, when we were watching the 6-day bicycle race, that at the age of 14, while spending my holidays with a vicar of sorts who had been told off to teach me Latin, I had won the choir boy's handicap at the local school teat. A different thing from boasting of one's triumphs at the wheel. I mean, he was a man of the world, and must have known that the form of school treats is never of the hottest. And, if I'm not mistaken, I had specifically told him that on the occasion referred to, I had received half a lap start, and that Willie Punting, the odds-on favourite to whom the race was expected to be a gift, had been forced to retire, owing to having pinched his elder brother's machine without asking the elder brother. and the elder brother coming along just as the pistol went and giving him on the side of the head and taking it away from him, thus rendering him a scratched at the post non-starter. Yet, from the way he talked, you would have thought I was one of those chaps in sweaters with medals all over them, whose photographs bob up from time to time in the illustrated press on the occasion of their having ridden from Hyde Park Corner to Glasgow in 3 seconds under the hour, or whatever it is. As if this were not bad enough, Tuppy had to shove his oar in. "That's right," said Tuppy. "Bertie's always been a great cyclist. I remember at Oxford he used to take all his clothes off on a bumps up at nights and ride around the quad, singing comic songs. Jolly fast he used to go too." "Then he can go jolly fast now," said Aunt Dahlia with animation. "He can't go too fast for me. He may also sing comic songs if he likes, and if you wish to take your clothes off, Bertie, my lamb, by all means do. But whether clothed or in the nude, whether sing comic songs or not sing comic songs, get a move on." I found speech. But I've been ridden for years. And it's high time you began again. Oh, alright, hang on. Hang tight. See, we're having some buffering. It's been a while. I can't even be mad at YouTube anymore. It's probably been like, what, 3 weeks since we had any real buffering problems? So hang tight. Okay, I think we're fine. I'm not seeing dropped frames. Toggle the monitor back to live. Make sure we stay good. Maybe. Yep. Alright, I think we're good. We'll just take that back from the top of the this exchange. I found speech, but I haven't ridden for years, and it's high time you began again. I've probably forgotten how to ride. You'll soon get the knack for it after you've taken a toss or two. Trial and error, the only way. But it's miles to Kingham. Sooner you're off the better. But, Bertie dear, but dash it, Bertie darling, but dash it, Bertie my sweet. And so it was arranged. Presently I was moving somberly off through the darkness, Jeeves at my side, Aunt Dahlia calling after me something about trying to imagine myself the man who brought the good news from Ghent to Aix. The first I had heard of the chap. "So, Jeeves," I said, as we reached the shed, and my voice was cold and bitter, "this is what your great scheme has accomplished? Tuppy, Angela, Gussie, and the Basset not on speaking terms, and self faced with an 8-mile ride?" "9, I believe, sir. A 9-mile ride, and another 9-mile ride back." "I am sorry, sir." "No good being sorry now. Where is this foul bone shaker?" "I will bring it out, sir." He did so. I eyed it sourly. "Where's the lamp?" "I fear there is no lamp, sir." "No lamp?" "No, sir." "But I may come a fearful stinker without a lamp. Suppose I barge into something." I broke off and eyed him frigidly. "You smile, Jeeves. The thought amuses you." "I beg your pardon, sir. I was thinking of a tale my Uncle Cyril used to tell me when I was a child. An absurd little story, sir, though I confess that I have always found it droll. According to my Uncle Cyril, 2 men named Nichols and Jackson set out to ride to Brighton on a tandem bicycle, and were so unfortunate as to come into a collision with a brewer's van, and when the rescue party arrived on the scene of the accident, it was discovered that they had been hurled together with such force that it was impossible to sort them all out at all adequately. The keenest eye could not discern which portion of the fragments was Nichols and which Jackson, so they collected as much as they could and called it Nixon. I remember laughing very much at that story when I was a child, sir." I had to pause a moment to master my feelings. "You did, eh?" "Yes, sir." "You thought it funny?" "Yes, sir." "And your Uncle Cyril thought it funny?" "Yes, sir." "Golly, what a family! Next time you meet your Uncle Cyril, Jeeves, you can tell him from me that his sense of humour is morbid and unpleasant." "He is dead, sir." "Thank heaven for that." "Well, give me the blasted machine." "Very good, sir." "Are the tires inflated?" "Yes, sir." "The nuts firm, the brakes in order, the sprockets running true and with the differential gear?" "Yes, sir." "Right-o, Jeeves." In Tuppy's statement that when at the University of Oxford I had been known to ride a bicycle in the nude about the quadrangle of our mutual college, there had been, I cannot deny, a certain amount of substance. Correct, however, though these facts were, so far as they went, he had not told all. What he had omitted to mention was that I had invariably been well oiled at the time, and when in that condition a chap is capable of feats at which, in cooler moments, his reason would rebel. Stimulated by the juice, I believe, men have even been known to ride alligators. As I started now to paddle out into the great world, I was icily sober, and the old skill, in consequence, had deserted me entirely. I found myself wobbling badly, and all the stories I'd ever heard of nasty bicycle accidents came back to me with a rush, headed by by Jeeves's Uncle Cyril's cheery little anecdote about Nichols and Jackson. Pounding warily through the darkness, I found myself at a loss to fathom the mentality of men like Jeeves's Uncle Cyril. What on earth he could see funny in a disaster which had apparently involved the complete extinction of a human creature, or, at any rate, of half a human creature and half another human creature, was more than I could understand. To me, the thing was one of the most poignant tragedies that ever had been brought to my attention, and I have no doubt that I should have continued to brood over it for quite a time, had my thoughts not been diverted by the sudden necessity of zigzagging sharply in order to avoid a pig in the fairway. For a moment it looked like being a real Nichols and Jackson stuff, but fortunately a quick zig on my part, coinciding with an adroit zag on the part of the pig, enabled me to win through, and I continued my ride safe, but with the heart fluttering like a captive bird. The effect of this narrow squeak upon me was to shake the nerve to the utmost. The fact that pigs were abroad in the night seemed to bring home to me the perilous nature of my enterprise. It set me thinking of all the other things that could happen to a man out and about on a velocipede without a lamp after lighting up time. In particular, I recalled the statement of a pal of mine who, in certain sections of the rural districts, goats were accustomed to stray across the road to the extent of their chains, thereby forming about as sound a booby trap as one could well wish. He mentioned, I remember, the case of a friend of his whose machines got entangled with a goat chain, and who was dragged 7 miles like skioring in Switzerland, so that he was never the same man again. And there was one chap who ran into an elephant, left over from a travelling circus. Indeed, taking it for all in all, it seemed to me that, with the possible exception of being bitten by sharks, there was virtually no front-page disaster that could not happen to a fellow once he had allowed his dear ones to override his better judgment and shove him out into the great unknown on a push-bike. And I am not ashamed to confess that, taking it by and large, the amount of quailing I did from this point on was pretty considerable. However, in respect to goats and elephants, I must say things panned out unexpectedly well. Oddly enough, I encountered neither. But when you have said that, you have said that, you have said everything. For in every other way, the conditions could scarcely have been fouler. Apart from the ceaseless anxiety of having to keep an eye skinned for elephants, I found myself much depressed by barking dogs. And once I received a most unpleasant shock when, alighting to consult a signpost, I saw sitting on top of it an owl that looked exactly like my Aunt Agatha. So agitated, indeed, had my frame of mind become by this time that I thought at first it was Aunt Agatha, and only when reason and reflection told me how alien to her habits it would be to climb signposts and sit upon them, could I pull myself together and overcome the weakness. In short, what with all this mental disturbance added to the more purely physical anguish in the billowy portions in the calves and the ankles, the Bertram Wooster who eventually toppled off at the door of Kingham Manor was a very different Bertram from the gay and insouciant boulevardier of Bond Street and Piccadilly. Even to one unaware of the inside facts, it would have been evident that Kingham Manor was throwing its weight about a bit tonight. Lights shone in the windows, music was in the air, and as I drew nearer, my ear detected the sibilant shuffling of the feet of butlers, footmen, chauffeurs, parlour-maids, housemaids, tweenies, and, I have no doubt, cooks, who were busily treading the measure. I suppose you couldn't sum it up much better than by saying that there was a sound of revelry by night. The orgy was taking place in one of the ground-floor rooms, which had French windows open onto the drive, and it was to these French windows that I now made my way. An orchestra was playing something with a good deal of zip to it, and under happier conditions I dare say my feet would have started twitching in time to the melody. But I had sterner work before me than to stand hoofing it by means on gravel drives. I wanted that back door key, and I wanted it instanter. Scanning the throng within, I found it difficult for a while to spot Seppings. Presently, however, he hove in view, doing fearfully lissom things in the mid-floor. I Seppings a few times, but his mind was too much on his job to be diverted. and it was only when the swirl of the dance had brought him within prodding distance of my forefinger that a quick one to the lower ribs enabled me to claim his attention. The unexpected buffet caused him to trip over his partner's feet, and it was with marked austerity that he turned. As he recognized Bertram, however, the coldness melted to be replaced by astonishment. "Mr. Wooster!" I was in no mood for bandying words. "Less of the Mr. Wooster and more backdoor keys," I said curtly. "Give me the key of the back door, Sappings." He did not seem to grasp the gist. "The key of the back door, sir?" "Precisely. The Brinkley Court back door key." "But it is at the court, sir." I clicked the tongue annoyed. "Don't be frivolous, my dear old butler," I said. "I haven't ridden 9 miles on a pushbike to listen to you trying to be funny. You've got it in your trousers pocket." "No, sir. I left it with Mr. Jeeves." "You did what?" "Yes, sir. Before I came away, Mr. Jeeves said he wished to walk in the garden before retiring for the night. He was to place the key on the kitchen window-sill." I stared at the man dumbly. His eye was clear, his hand steady. He had none of the appearance of a butler who has had a couple. "You mean that all this while the key has been in Jeeves' possession?" "Yes, sir." I could speak no more. Emotion had overmastered my voice, and I was at a loss, and not abreast but of one thing. It seemed to me there could be no doubt, for some reason not to be fathomed now, but most certainly to be gone well into as soon as I pushed this infernal sewing machine of mine over those 9 miles of lonely country road and got within striking distance of him, Jeeves had been doing the dirty. Knowing that at any given moment he could have solved the whole situation, he had kept Aunt Dahlia and others roosting out in front of the lawn and deshabille, and worse still, had stood calmly by and watched his young employer set out on a wholly unnecessary 18-mile bicycle ride. I could scarcely believe there's such a thing of him. And of his Uncle Cyril, yes, but with that distorted sense of humour of his, Uncle Cyril might conceivably have been capable of such conduct. But that it should be Jeeves! I leaped into the saddle, and, stifling the cry of agony which rose to the lips as the bruised person touched the hard leather, set out on the homeward journey. And that is the end of chapter 22. And I do have a little bit of sympathy for Bertie here, having taken up cycling after a many years blank. There is a decided bit of bruising that happens in bits that are best left unknown. So if you go a little too happily onto the saddle, you're in for a bad time. But it is a clever piece of work by Jeeves to get Bertie out of everyone's hair for 4 or 5 hours. Nice little twist there. I like that. Alright, so we have just one chapter left, and it is only about 8-ish pages or so. So we can afford to, well, I would say take it slow, but really the pacing of this book is so frantic and high energy that we can't really take it slow, can we? Otherwise it loses half the character. If Bertie isn't rambling faster than the mind can think, is he really Bertie? His tongue goes faster than his mind can think, so it only makes sense that I try and emulate that. So, let's keep on and carry on as we get through the last chapter of Right Ho, Jeeves. Chapter 23. I remember Jeeves saying on one occasion, I forget how the subject had arisen, he may simply have thrown the observation out, as he does sometimes, for me to take or leave, that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And until tonight, I had always felt that there was a lot in it. I never scorned a woman myself, but Pongo Twistleton had once scorned an aunt of his, flatly refusing to meet her son Gerald at Paddington and give him lunch, and see him off to school at Waterloo. And he had never heard the end of it. Letters were written, he tells me, which had to be seen to be believed. Also, 2 very strong telegrams and a bit of picture postcard with a view of the little Chilbury War Memorial on it. Until tonight, therefore, as I say, I had never questioned the accuracy of the statement. Scorned women first and the rest nowhere, was how it had always seemed to me. But tonight I revised my views, If you want to know what hell can really do in the way of furies, look for the chap who has been hornswoggled into taking a long and unnecessary bicycle ride in the dark without a lamp. Mark that word, unnecessary. That was the part of it that really jabbed the iron into the soul. I mean, if it was a case of riding to the doctor's to save the child with the croup, or going off to the local pub to fetch supplies in the event of the cellar having run dry, no one would leap to the handlebars more readily than I. One of these things is not like the other, Bertie. Young Lochavar, absolutely, but this business of being put through it merely to gratify one's personal attendant's diseased sense of the amusing was a bit too thick, and I chafed from start to finish. So, what I mean to say, although the providence which watches over good men saw to it that I was enabled to complete the homeward journey unscathed, except in the billowy portions, removing from my path all goats, elephants, and even owls that looked like my Aunt Agatha, it was a frowning and jaundiced Bertram who finally came to anchor at the Brinkley Court front door. And when I saw a dark figure emerging from the porch to meet me, I prepared to let myself go and uncork all that was fitting in the mind. "Jeeves," I said.
"It is I, Bertie."
"Oh, wait a minute. It is I, Bertie." The voice which spoke sounded like warm treacle, and even if I had not recognized it immediately as that of the Basset, I should have known that it did not proceed from the man I was yearning to confront. For this figure before me was wearing a simple tweed dress, and had employed my first name in its remarks, and Jeeves, whatever his moral defects, would never go about in skirts calling me Bertie. The last person, of course, whom I would have wished to meet after a long evening in the saddle, but I vouchsafed a courteous "What ho?" There was a pause, during which I massaged the calves. Mine, of course, I mean. "You got in, then?" I said, in allusion to the change of costume. "Oh, yes. About a quarter of an hour after you left, Jeeves went searching about and found the back door key on the kitchen windowsill." "Ha! What?" "Nothing. I thought you said something." "No, nothing." And I continued to do so, for at this juncture, as had so often happened when this girl and I were closeted, the conversation once more went blue on us. The night breeze whispered, but not the Basset. A bird twittered, but not so much as a chirp escaped Bertram. It was perfectly amazing, the way her mere presence seemed to wipe speech from my lips, and mine, for that matter, from hers. It began to look as if our married life together would be rather like 20 years among the Trappist monks. "Seen Jeeves anywhere?" I asked, eventually coming through. "Yes, in the dining room." "The dining room, waiting on everybody. They're having eggs and bacon and champagne." "What did you say?" I had said nothing, merely snorted. There was something about the thought of these people carelessly revelling at a time when, for all they knew, I was probably being dragged about the countryside by goats or chewed by elephants that struck home at me like a poisoned dart. It was the sort of thing you read about as having happened just before the French Revolution. The haughty nobles in their castles callously digging in and quaffing, while the unfortunate blighters outside were suffering frightful privations. The voice of the Basset cut in on these mordant reflections. "Bertie? Hello?" Silence. "Hello?" I said again. No response. Whole thing rather like one of those telephone conversations when you sit at your end of the wire saying hello, hello, unaware that the party of the second part has gone off to tea. Eventually, however, she came to the surface again. "Bertie, I have something to say to you." "What?" "I have something to say to you." "I know," I said. "What?" "Oh, I thought you didn't hear what I said." "Yes, I heard what you said, all right, but not what you were going to say." "Oh, I see. Right-o." So that was straightened out. Nevertheless, instead of proceeding, she took time off once more. She stood twisting the fingers and scratching the gravel with her foot. When finally she spoke, it was to deliver an impressive boost. "Bertie, do you read Tennyson?" "Not if I can help." "You remind me so much of those Knights of the Round Table and the Idylls of the King." Of course I had heard of them, Lancelot, Galahad and all that. But I don't see where the resemblance came in. It seemed to me that she must be thinking of a couple of other fellows. I appreciate that Bertie does not see the chivalrous spirit in himself. "How do you mean?" "You have such a great heart, such a fine soul. You're so generous, so unselfish, so chivalrous. I've always felt that about you. that you're one of the few really chivalrous men I have ever met." "Well, dash difficult, of course, to know what to say when someone's giving you the old oil on a scale like that." I muttered an "oh, yes," or something on those lines, and rubbed the billowy portions in some embarrassment. And there was another silence, broken only by a sharp howl as I rubbed a bit too hard. So, as far as his... Bertie does seem like some of the knights that we saw in La Morte d'Arthur, but I think in the more common parlance of the knights, and the general feeling that they're all faultless saints that most people are kind of coming from, I don't think Bertie quite stands up. But as we saw, you're right. There are a few of those knights that were rather full of flaws that that could fit. That could fit reasonably well. Bertie and Galahad, that'd be a pretty good comparison, actually. Ah, yeah, Gawain would fit really well. All right. Bertie? Hello? I heard her sort of give a gulp. Bertie, will you be chivalrous now? Rather, only too pleased. How do you mean? I am going to try you to the utmost. I am going to test you as few men have ever been tested. I didn't like the sound of this. Well, I said doubtfully, always glad to oblige, you know, but I've had the dickens of a bicycle ride, and I'm a bit stiff and sore, especially in the... as I say, a bit stiff and sore. If it's anything to be fetched from upstairs... No, you don't understand. I don't. Quite, no. Oh, it's so difficult. How can I say it? Can't you guess? No, I'm dashed if I can. Bertie, let me go. But I haven't got hold of you. Release me. And then I got it. I suppose it was fatigue that made me so slow to apprehend the nub. What? I staggered, and the left pedal came up and caught me on the shin. But such was the ecstasy in the soul that I didn't utter a cry. Release you? Yes. I didn't want any confusion on the point. You mean you want to call it all off? You're going to hitch up with Gussie after all? Only if you're fine and big enough to consent. Oh, I am. I gave you my promise. Dash promises. Then you really absolutely. Oh, Bertie. She seemed to sway like a sapling. It is saplings that sway, I believe. A very perfect night. I heard her murmur, and there not being much to say after that, I excused myself on the ground that I got about 2 pecks of dust down my back, and would like to go and get my maid to put me into something loose. You go back to Gussie, I said, and tell him that all is well. She gave a sort of hiccup, and darting forward, kissed me on the forehead. Unpleasant, of course, but as Anatole would say, I can take a few smooths with a rough. The next moment she was legging it for the dining room, while I, having bunged the bicycle into a bush, made for the stairs. I need not dwell upon my buckedness. It can be readily imagined. Talk about chaps with the noose round their necks, and the hangman about to let her go, and somebody galloping in on a foaming horse, waving the reprieve. Not in it. Absolutely not in it at all. I don't know that I can give you a better idea of the state of my feelings than by saying that, as I started to cross the hall, I was conscious of so profound a benevolence toward all created things that I found myself thinking kindly thoughts even of Jeeves. I was about to mount the stairs when a sudden what-ho from my rear caused me to turn. Tuppy was standing in the hall. He had apparently been down in the cellar for reinforcements, for there were a couple of bottles under his arm. "Hello, Bertie," he said. "You back?" He laughed amusedly. "You look like the wreck of the Hesperus. Get run over by a steamroller or something." At any other time I might have found this coarse badinage hard to bear, but such was my uplifted mood that I waved it aside and slipped him the good news. "Tuppy, old man, the Bassett's going to marry Gussie Fignotle." "Tough luck on both of them, what?" "But don't you understand? Don't you see what this means? It means that Angela is once more out of pawn. And you've only to play your cards properly." He bellowed rockingly. I saw now that he was in the pink. As a matter of fact, I had noticed something of the sort directly I met him, but had attributed it to alcoholic stimulant. "Good Lord, you're right behind the times, Bertie. Only to be expected, of course, if you will go riding bicycles half the night." Angela and I made it up hours ago.
What?
Certainly. Nothing but a passing tiff. All you need in these matters is a little give and take. A bit of reasonableness on both sides. We got together and talked things over. She withdrew my double chin. I conceded her shark. Perfectly simple. All done in a couple of minutes.
But...
Sorry, Bertie. Can't stop chatting with you all night. There is a rather impressive beano in progress in the dining room, and they are waiting for supplies.
Endorsement was given to this statement by a sudden shout from the apartment named. I recognized, as who would not, Aunt Dahlia's voice.
Glass up! Hello? Hurry up with that stuff! Coming. Well then. Yoicks! Hard for now! Tell you, not to mention Tantivy, your aunt,
said Tuppy,
is a bit above herself. I don't know all the facts of the case, but it appears that Anatole gave notice and has now consented to stay on, and also your uncle has given her a check for that paper of hers. I don't get the details, but she is much braced. See you later. I must rush.
So yes, everything seems to be just working out. To say that Bertram was now definitely nonplussed would be but to state the simple truth. I could make nothing of this. I had left Brinkley Court a stricken home, with hearts bleeding wherever you looked, and I had returned to find it sort of earthly paradise. It baffled me. I bathed bewilderedly. The toy duck was still in soap dish, but I was too preoccupied to give it a thought. Still at a loss, I returned to my room, and there was Jeeves. And it is proof of my fogged condition that my first words to him were words not of reproach and stern recrimination, but of inquiry. I say, Jeeves.
Good evening, sir. I was informed that you had returned. I trust you had an enjoyable ride.
At any other moment, a crack like that would have woken the fiend in Bertram Wooster. I barely noticed it. I was intent on getting to the bottom of this mystery. But I say, Jeeves, what?
Sir, what does all this mean?
You refer, sir? Of course I refer! You know what I'm talking about! What has been happening here since I left? The place is positively stiff with happy endings!
Yes, sir. I am glad to say that my efforts have been rewarded.
What do you mean, your efforts? You aren't even going to try and make out all that rotten firebell scheme of yours had anything to do with it?
Yes, sir.
Don't be an ass, Jeeves! It flopped!
Not altogether, sir. I fear, sir, that I was not entirely frank with regard to my suggestion of ring the firebell. I had not really anticipated that it would itself produce the desired results. I had intended it merely as a preliminary to what might describe as the real business of the evening.
You gibber, Jeeves!
No, sir. It was essential that the ladies and gentlemen should be brought from the house, in order that, once out of doors, I could ensure that they remained there for the necessary period of time.
How do you mean?
My plan was based on psychology, sir.
How?
It is a recognized fact, sir, that there is nothing that so satisfactorily unites individuals who have been so unfortunate as to quarrel amongst themselves as a strong mutual dislike for some definite person. In my own family, if I may give a homely illustration, it was a generally accepted axiom that in times of domestic disagreement it was necessary only to invite my Aunt Annie for a visit to heal all breaches between the other members of the household. In the mutual animosity excited by Aunt Annie, those who had become estranged were reconciled almost immediately. Remembering this, it occurred to me that were you, sir, to be established as the person responsible for the ladies and gentlemen being forced to spend the night in the garden, everybody would take so strong a dislike to you that, in this common sympathy, they would sooner or later come together.
I would have spoken, but he continued.
And such proved to be the case. All, as you see, sir, is now well. After your departure on the bicycle, the various estranged parties agreed so heartily in their abuse of you that the ice, if I may use the expression, was broken. And it was not long before Mr. Glossop was walking beneath the trees with Miss Angela, telling her anecdotes of your career at the university, in exchange for hers regarding your childhood, while Mr. Finknottle, leaning against the sundial, held Miss Bassett enthralled with stories of your school days. Mrs. Travers, meanwhile, was telling Monsieur Anatole—
I found speech.
Oh, I said, I see, and now, I suppose, as the result of this dashed psychology of yours, Aunt Dahlia is so sore with me that it will be years before I can dare to show my face here again. Years, Jeeves, during which, night after night, Anatole will be cooking those dinners of his. No, sir, it was to prevent any such contingency that I suggested that you should bicycle to Kingham Manor. When I informed the ladies and gentlemen that I had found the key, and it was borne in upon them that you were having that long ride for nothing, their animosity vanished immediately, to be replaced by cordial amusement. There was much laughter. There was, eh? Yes, sir. I fear you may possibly have to submit to a certain amount of good-natured chaff, but nothing more. All, if I may say so, is forgiven, sir. Oh, yes, sir. I mused a while. You certainly seem to have fixed things. Yes, sir. Tuppy and Angela are once more betrothed. Also Gussie and the Basset. Uncle Tom appears to have coughed up that money from my lady's boudoir, and Anatole is staying on. Yes, sir. I suppose you might say that all's well that ends well. Very apt, sir. I mused again. All the same, your methods are a bit rough, Jeeves. One cannot make an omelette without breaking eggs, sir. I started. Omelette? Do you think you could get me one? Certainly, sir. Together with half a bottle of something? Undoubtedly, sir. Do so, Jeeves, and with all speed. I climbed into bed and sank back against the pillows. I must say that my generous wrath had ebbed a bit. I was aching the whole length of my body, particularly toward the middle, but against this you had to set the fact that I was no longer engaged to Madeline Bassett. In a good cause one is prepared to suffer. Yet, looking at the thing from every angle, I saw that Jeeves had done well, and it was with an approving beam that I welcomed him as he returned with the needful. He did not check up with this beam. A bit grave, he seemed to me to be looking, and I probed the matter with a kindly query. Something on your mind, Jeeves? Yes, sir. I should have mentioned it earlier, but in the evening's disturbance, it escaped my memory. I fear I have been remiss, sir. Yes, Jeeves, I said, champing contentedly. In the matter of your mess jacket, sir. A nameless fear shot through me, causing me to swallow a mouthful of omelettes the wrong way. I am sorry to say, sir, that while I was ironing it this afternoon, I was careless enough to leave the hot instrument upon it. I very much fear that it will be impossible for you to wear it again, sir. One of those old pregnant silences filled the room. I am extremely sorry, sir. For a moment, I confess that generous wrath of mine came bounding back, hitching up its muscles and snorting a bit through the nose, but, as we say on the Riviera, quoi sorti? There was nothing to be gained by GW now. We Woosters can bite the bullet. I nodded moodily and speared another slab of omelette. Right-ho, Jeeves. Very good, sir. And that is the end of Right-ho, Jeeves. It did, in the end, all work out perfectly. Jeeves had it all fit and fiddled and working out exactly to the best ending for everyone. Gussie and the Basset, the newt aficionado and the little star-eyed something are mended and off to be happy together. Angela and Tuppy are back together and ready to be happily at each other's throats for the next lifetime. The aunt and Uncle Tom have done well enough together. I'm not sure how well off Uncle Tom is, honestly. He's probably the worst off out of everyone, considering he owes the tax man and now has double paid for the magazine, but we'll override that for now. Anatole is staying on, so everyone in that household is still happy. And all it took was to convince all of the friends and family around the house that Bertie was the cause of everyone's misfortune. And was that really so wrong? Was it really so far from the truth? Yes, there was a little bit of a spin on things, but Bertie was not his own best friend here. So,
Jeeves just pointed things and prodded them just a little bit more of the direction to make sure that everyone recognized just how much of an ass he could be. And by also getting him out of the house on that worthless bike ride also brought a little bit of forgiveness, because knowing that the person that you're annoyed with is out suffering for no good reason is plenty cathartic. Let's be honest. It's very satisfying. Yeah, no lies, just a little bit of manipulation. And that is very, very British. And I will say, I will probably take a little while before I can properly ditch all this accent, because doing the narration and dialogue because the whole thing was Bertie dictating things. So doing it all in Bertie's voice is probably going to stick with me for a little bit. This has been a whole lot more bad English accent than I have done in years. So, I hope you're satisfied. But no, this was a lot of fun. I cannot overstate how much a wonderful change of pace it's been to do something that is just silly, goofy, funny. Comedy is a gift, and I, for the life of me, don't know why we haven't touched on it more in the past year. I think the closest thing to comedy we've had has been children's books, when we did like Alice in Wonderland, which was silly, but yeah. Well, to be fair, it's a little bit easier to slip in and out of the bad English than it is to slip into the bad Southern accent that I've used for some of the random NPC hicks that we've had through some of the stories. The bad country accents and the Josephs and things, those stick in a very terrible way. Bertie is at least somewhat charming, and it's okay to slip in and out of a little bit. But that is neither here nor there. Alright, so this has been... Yeah, I think you're right. It's just that so much classic lit is drama and tragedy. And yes, there is some comedy, but there's not as much of it. And the fact that, like, comedy for comedy's sake is really more of a somewhat modern take that has really taken on. And you need to remember that this is pretty new to the public domain. That is to say, it's only about 100 years old, which is reasonably modern, all things considered. Yeah. The Shakespearean comedies don't get nearly the attention. The tragedies and the romances and things. Now, the thing with Shakespeare, though, is that he couches comedy in with a lot of his more serious works as well. Like, there's a lot of satire bungled in with things. Romeo and Juliet is as much a comedy as it is a tragedy. So, there's a lot of mixed things there. But that also comes into play the fact that it's a play. He is a playwright. He's the playwright. And was really targeting the masses with what he read. And comedy plays off with the people in the trenches much better than anything that's even remotely hoity-toity. And that's not to denigrate comedy. Comedy's great. We just had a whole lot of fun with comedy. But if you're looking for something to have mass appeal, yeah. Yeah, I do remember when we did Romeo and Juliet in school, and like in our English unit, it was stressed very heavily that it was very much a comedy. Between the actual straight up comedy, like Mercutio, like you said, and also there are a lot of allusions to members and things that are somewhat lost on modern audiences that need some see, I will admit I had a fantastic set of English teachers in high school. It was great. Exposure to a lot of things, and they put up with my bullshit because I was one who slept through a lot of classes and did not do the readings and faked it through the discussions on readings. So it says quite a lot that I'm coming back with any sort of anecdotes from English classes. It's a vote of confidence in those teachers. Alright guys, so we are a little bit past 10. We have gotten through Righto Jeeves with wondrous aplomb. And we are set with perfect timing for our next reading to begin on Tuesday, where we will be reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Now, obviously, this is the book version, not the screenplay version, not the version that you may be familiar with. You can attribute a lot of things to Shakespeare. The earliest your mom jokes, just the invention of words because they fit his pentameter. Like, just an absolute wild wordsmith. Just the fact that we have words like assassinate are thanks to William Shakespeare. Old Bill. So, but alright, so yes, we are going to be reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz on Tuesday. As you may be aware, this is not the screenplay version, this is the original text. So, Wizard of Oz, or the Oz books in general, there are a lot of them. So we'll likely be dropping right into the middle of things. And this may or may not be the most appropriate one, but I don't care. If we were going to be making a proper series of it, I would, but this is a seasonal special, so to say. And I don't think it is terribly long. We may get through it on Tuesday, or it may be a 2-day sort of thing. And yes, they do get very weird. So this is a nice distraction, and to ease our way in, because it is most certainly coming up on the holiday season in force. So, probably next weekend, we'll be starting in with some of the more seasonal things. And actually, I was looking things up, and the Dickens Christmas Carol is not very long. We can probably finish that in just a couple sessions. I was expecting it to be much, much, much longer, because, I mean, Dickens. So, we'll have a few things to go through the course of this holiday season. And I do have an idea for a special that we may do as we get closer to the Christmas holiday itself, but it will, by necessity, have to be unarchived, because it is a more modern book. But we'll make plans for that as time comes up. Yeah, that's when I was looking up, I think it's only a couple hours of an audiobook, so it's probably like a 2-session read, maybe even a 1-session read, depending on our pacing. But yeah, I was terrified of it because, yeah, it's Dickens. You hear Dickens and you expect, like, A Tale of Two Cities, like, things like that, and, like, paid by the word sort of situation. But no, it's very reasonable. So, I'll need to find when and where to slot that in, just based on the length. But it should be fun. And there are, as always, so many good things for the season. So, we'll have a lot of fun, and you'll probably get sick of Christmassy stuff. And I won't be sorry for it. I don't terribly get too deep into the season, but this is as good an opportunity as ever. I'll put up my tree. Oh, I need to make a graphic or something to have some sort of festive vibe around the channel as we read. That's an idea. So I've got some homework in the next few days. Maybe well, you know what? It works out. I put up my tree at home the day after Thanksgiving. And our next reading after this Tuesday will be the day after Thanksgiving. So I think I have some homework to be ready by Friday. We've got some thinking to do. Yeah, so I try to I try to approach the season as relatively neutral. It is a good time to reconnect with family and to think of your own well wishes and the good things that have happened over the previous year. And you don't need to take too much more context into it than that. If you care to, great. If not, that's fine. It's just a good time to keep yourself humble and be thankful for the people that are or are not in your life. Sometimes the absence is every bit as beneficial as their presence. So, to each their own. Whether you wish it to be a Merry Christmas or a Happy Holiday, I'll not judge in the slightest. Alright guys, we are pushing past time and we've been yapping on a little bit. We will be back on Tuesday for our reading of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, our Thanksgiving-ish special. And then we'll have to start thinking about what comes with the next season. The Yuletide carries on. Alright then, with that, let's go ahead and wrap up for the evening. As always, thank you very much for joining us for this really wonderful diversion from what we normally read. A little bit of lighthearted humor to really get things off on the right foot. Alright. If you haven't yet, I encourage you to drop a like on the stream, maybe a subscription to the channel. And until next time, have a wonderful night. Bye now.